Hello, everybody. I'm Mehdi Hassan. I'm here in the DC studios of Zeteo. I'm joined by Rula, who is in... Rula, you in New York? I never know where
I
you
am
are.
in New York. I just got back to New York, yes.
There you go. Just got back. Rula is always traveling, which is why we're taking advantage of her expertise. She's one of our best foreign policy analysts. She's a Zeteo contributor. She's an academic, a journalist, an author. She's Palestinian, Italian, American, and she's someone who's covered Lebanon for a fair bit, Rula. And today we're going to be talking about Israel's expanding war in the Middle East, dragging as many countries into this as possible. At one point last week, they were bombing Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, and Gaza all on the same day, which is pretty impressive.
Or country.
Astonishingly negatively impressive. The Biden administration is fully on board. As we're speaking now, Israel is making even more preparations to go further into Lebanon. Iran has obviously hit Israel in response to the killing of Nasrallah and Hezbollah last week. This region is in a pretty bad way, Rula, and we are weeks out from an election. I saw one guy on Twitter, I think it was Jeet here of the Nation, joke that Joe Biden has October surprised his own candidate. You have the Democrats now in trouble as a war expands in the Middle East. Donald Trump is weaponizing this. There's a lot to discuss. We've got around 200 people and more joining this chat right now. Zeteo subscribers, thank you all for joining. Please put your questions in the chat. I see there's already a question there, but let me kick off with my own question for you, Rula, which is, you've been covering Lebanon since the 2006 Lebanon-Israel war, when Israel attacked Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah took soldiers hostage. As with previous Gaza wars, there's no comparison between what's happening in Gaza now versus previous Gaza wars. Similarly, Rula, is it fair to say there's no comparison between what's happening in Lebanon now with what's come before, right?
Absolutely. If you just think of the death toll, Mehdi, in 2006, Israel killed 1,200 Lebanese in 5 weeks, 34 days. Now, in 4 days, 5 days, Israel killed 1,600 Lebanese, leveled entire areas in the Dahiya and certain areas, and basically led to the displacement, internal displacement of 1 million Lebanese, with a kind of attacks and the use of American bombs, the 2,000-ton bombs and 3,000 and 5,000. I never seen this before. And for the first time, both the rhetoric and the actions resemble something that actually I am aware of, which is 1982. They have different weaponaries, but the second invasion and occupation of Lebanon, I was a child. I must admit, I was a child, but one morning I woke up with my entire family in Haifa, sobbing, crying. It was after the massacre of Sabra Shatila, where the militias, the Israel proxies, helped by Israel Defense Minister Ariel Sharon, entered 2 refugee camps and killed within days 3,500 civilians. And when I woke up that morning and my family was sobbing because it was the first massacre that was televised, it was a watershed moment. And I remember that's a moment as a child, watching my family, watching our people being slaughtered in refugee camps across the border. I think it also sent a signal to the rest of the world that Israel is, the action was not defensive, because the Palestinians were convinced to leave Lebanon. The PLO was convinced there was a deal that was brokered by the Lebanese and the Arab League and the Americans, with the participation of Philip Habib, who was the American envoy, convinced them to lay down arms and to go to Tunisia. And the PLO did that under one condition, that the civilians, the elderly, the children, the women in the refugee camps would be protected. America broke its word, and Israel exploited that vacuum and committed that massacre.
What's so interesting that you bring up 1982 right at the beginning, and we love history here at Zeteo. We love context, because the world did not begin on October the 7th. And I was on Piers Morgan's show recently, and I pointed out to him what happened in 1970 and 1982. And you mentioned 82 is so interesting because, of course, the direct parallels are very clear. In 1982, they went in claiming to fight the PLO, but that's when Hezbollah was created.
Exactly.
And of course, Ronald Reagan famously saw the destruction in Beirut, called Menachem Begin and said, this is a Holocaust. You use the H word. This is a Holocaust. You need to stop it now. And Begin stopped it within 20 minutes. Joe Biden is not doing that right now. And I want to remind our subscribers, the chat is open, the Q&A. Put your questions in the chat. Michael Connors is a Zeteo subscriber. He has a question where he's saying, that Politico is now reporting that the White House gave Israel the green light to invade Lebanon with full support. Do you envision a scenario, he asks, in which the Biden administration is actually hoping to be drawn into the conflict? And that's a great question from Michael Rula, because sometimes we report on the Biden administration as if they're hapless bystanders being dragged.
No, they're not.
By Netanyahu. But how much is this? Is it America saying, actually, yeah, we want to go after Hezbollah alongside Israel. We want to go after Iran.
Yeah, I truly believe. I mean, there's three. If I may answer this in a way where it's amazing that they denied it initially. They were sending text messages to my friends and people who are in Lebanon, diplomats and academics and journalists. The U.S. embassy in Lebanon was texting them privately saying, we have nothing to do with the Israeli attacks. We were not even aware of it. And within 24 hours, we discovered that actually they greenlit it. How do I know they greenlit it? Not only nobody denied it, but also we know that Biden, while he was using the ceasefire talks, he was moving military assets into the region, 5,000 soldiers. We have a fleet across, basically we have a fleet in the Mediterranean Sea. And I believe that the taking out of Hassan Nasrallah happened not only because, you know, when Netanyahu brags, we did this ourselves, we are winning, whatever, he's not winning. It's an American war, and it's fought with an American weapons and with American intelligence and with American bombs. Just to be clear, Israel cannot do this alone.
On that note, I'm going to jump in with another similar connected question from Robert Holder, who says, is it possible that the US is using Israel as a tool to accomplish goals that it itself would like to do, if not for the US populace's war fatigue? Is there some Cheney-like bloodthirsty character in the background? I mean, Brett McGurk is someone I think people should know his name. He's been heavily involved in American administration failures in the Middle East, going back to Iraq, Syria, and now Gaza and Lebanon. But it's an interesting question. Who's driving this on the Biden administration side, do we think? Who's pushing for this nonsensical policy? Are there not wiser heads within this administration?
No, I mean, I think Sullivan, Blinken, McGurk, and many others are the face of this failed foreign policy. And well, I would call it a nationalist, Trump-like, thuggish foreign policy. They really believe they can reshape the Middle East. They're even now allowing some of their allies into, I mean, this is Jared Kushner, the Kahana's foreign policy. This is the continuation of the same playbook where they're talking about redrawing the maps of the Middle East once again, talking about invading Lebanon and occupying certain areas, and even taking down Iran. I mean, this is madness. We have lunatics who took over the asylum. I mean, how can you take down Iran? It's a country of 100 million people. Yes, the regime is unpopular, but they have basically missiles that can not only reach Israel. Yesterday, one of the missiles, and it was, I think, again, a message. They never meant really to create the chaos. But if they would overwhelm the Iron Dome, the David Sling, and the Arrow, all of the protective edge around Israel with thousands of these missiles, there's no way that they couldn't hit the headquarters of the Mossad that happens to be inside the center of Tel Aviv, very close to very populated civilian areas. So
it's ironic that Israel has spent a year killing civilians in Gaza, claiming it's because Hamas built their bases underneath residential areas. And you have both the Mossad headquarters, I believe, in the suburbs of Tel Aviv, and the Israeli Defense Force headquarers
in the center of Tel Aviv.
In the center of Tel Aviv, near a hospital, near an art gallery, near a shopping mall.
Exactly.
So, there's a great irony there when it comes to the Israeli.
It's more than irony. It's, I think, Mehdi, it's the whole idea that there are certain tier of laws and rules and considerations that America's allies are, you know, they will use for themselves. For everybody else, there's other rules. And it goes back to actually a conference that was held in '82 when people were criticizing the Sabra Shatila. There was a propaganda conference in Tel Aviv, a rebranding of these policies where they said propaganda is not a bad tool. It's actually one of the weapons of this long war. And Israel needs to use propaganda effectively to dominate the narrative. And dominating narrative, how? You start with dehumanization, talking about human shields and legitimate military target. If Iran would use the same narrative, they would blow up Tel Aviv.
Yes, which is interesting that they haven't done that. Let me, you mentioned earlier Jared Kushner, which I'm glad you mentioned, Kushner, because there's a question from Layla Tusi. And Layla says, don't you think Trump would be a better choice regarding the escalation of this into World War III? Before you answer, Rula, let me just say, Layla, I did a video for Zeteo. I urge you to watch it, which debunks this idea that Donald Trump is some kind of anti-war dove. He's not. We forget that before Israel killed Nasrallah, Trump assassinated Qasem Soleimani, Iran's top general, on Iraqi soil, and almost started World War III then. He tried to start World War III with Kim Jong-un in his first year in office, accused him of being fat and saying he's a little rocket man. This is a guy who escalated drone strikes in Pakistan, in Somalia, in Iran, in Syria. I think we shouldn't forget how militaristic Trump's record was. And Rula, over to you. Talk about Jared Kushner, because he just put out a very long tweet the other day saying that my advice to Israel is finish the job.
This is the same word that actually Bibi Netanyahu used in Congress when he said, give us the tools and we will finish the job. The job is expansionist foreign policy. The job is a greater Israel, where people are actually advertising now villas in Lebanon, villas in Gaza. Jared Kushner's view is bomb the hell of the Middle East. Who cares about millions of people? Who cares about people dying? Who cares about international law? We will have some kind of resort afterwards on top of these mass graves. Who cares?
Beachfront property, I think he talked about.
Exactly. And then Jared Kushner and Donald Trump foreign policy is not only transactional, it's genocidal, literally genocidal. When Donald Trump, actually, I believe that everything that happened in Gaza today, you can trace it back to foreign policy that started with ignore the Palestinians, the Abraham Accords. We will normalize relationship with Arab regimes. We'll give them weapons. We'll give them nuclear technology. And somehow, who cares about Palestine? Because the world doesn't care. The Palestinian issue is not in the center. Guess what? That kind of reasoning actually led us to more radicalization and the horrible attack of October 7th. So if you're talking to me about foreign policy of Donald Trump, just listen to one fact. Donald Trump accepted $100 million from Miriam Adelson, and with one condition: ethnically cleansing the West Bank, not Gaza. They already did it in Gaza. I believe that Gaza is unlivable. They rendered it unlivable. You cannot live anymore in Gaza because of the chemicals and the weapons and also the debris and
42
and the
million
famine.
tons of rubble.
Exactly. It will take basically 15 years just to clear out the area. It's just unlivable. But if you annex the West Bank and ethnic cleanse 3 million Palestinians, you're basically, endorsing total genocide and total erasure of the Palestinian people. So Donald Trump is not better. I believe that, the jury is out on Kamala Harris.
Well, on that note, Rula, I'm going to jump in. On that note, two things. One is they've already started the ethnic cleansing of the West Bank. The violence in the West Bank recently has been out of control. Joe Wilkinson asks, is there any possibility that Kamala Harris is not on board with Biden's war plans?
Yes. Look, I think she really disagreed a lot initially since March and whatever, but she's not leading the foreign policy. It's the president. And I have on good knowledge that both Blinken and Sullivan mistreated her while she was in the White House. I believe that they really treated her as naive and basically, somebody who doesn't understand the region, as if the white boys from the White House understand better the region, a region that they always describe in a racist colonial way.
They're two of the most disastrous figures to hold a foreign policy.
Absolutely. And this will decimate their legacy. But I think that there's two things that we need to keep in mind. And I'm going to say this with I had a thought last night, and it's like, I don't know if Joe Biden wants Kamala to win. And I'm saying this because, look, he was pushed out of the White House. His foreign policy that escalated in the last, maybe was already bad, but it was passive. It was like, I'm helpless. Now it's moving in a direction that it's obvious will undermine Kamala and will lead to a Trump victory. Is that intentional or no? I don't know, but it scares me.
Very interesting point you make then. Yes, whether it's witting or not, we keep seeing these reports. I just saw them yesterday of journalists being leaked that Biden's very upset at how he's been treated by his party. Like, first of all, put your big boy pants on. This is not about you, Joseph Biden. But separately, there must be some resentment. He wouldn't be human if there wasn't some resentment. And what's interesting is the 1968 analogy that I've been banging on about for months, which is Hubert Humphrey is the vice president. He takes over from LBJ, who becomes the first president not to run for a second term. And he's running the Vietnam War. And everyone's telling Hubert Humphrey, disown the war, distance yourself from LBJ.
Yes.
Humphrey doesn't do it till September the 30th. His poll ratings
go up,
but it's too little, too late. Nixon beats him by 0.5 percentage point. we've now crossed September 30th, 2024. Harris has not disowned Biden or the war. In fact, she put out a statement on the Nasrallah killing, which didn't even mention Lebanese civilians. It was such a grotesquely offensive statement. But yes, you have to wonder, why on earth is the Biden White House doing things which they know is undermining Harris? There's no scenario in which it doesn't hurt her to be in the middle of a wider Middle East war days before an election. This is an October surprise, as Jeet here says they've done to themselves. Let me broaden the conversation. Joseph Ali, a subscriber, asks, can the UN do anything to curb the obvious intent of America, and I assume Israel, to engage Iran militarily? We're speaking on the day, Rula, that the Israeli foreign minister bragged that he has banned the UN Secretary General from entering Israel. What a country.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the UN have the ability. I think they're really crippled the United Nations since the Iraq War. But I mean, we never seen a country. I mean, Israel is really, the leadership is drunk on hubris and power and impunity. And now they're bragging about banning a UN Secretary General simply because he condemned all war crimes and he wants, like every country, to uphold international humanitarian law. And this comes after a year where there have been killing in massive numbers, hundreds of UN employees in Gaza and beyond, and basically targeting NGOs. I mean, the World Kitchen and many others, and doctors and writers and professionals. I mean, I collect evidence of war crimes, and I never seen in my lifetime the amount of evidence that they're being put out by Israeli soldiers themselves. I mean, if I compare this to what happened after, let's say, Iraq, or what happened after the massacre of Sabra Shatila, everybody actually tried to deny. They were ashamed. Now, not only they're owning it, they're bragging about it, and they're floating their impunity in such a way that Bibi Netanyahu gave the order to blow up the entire neighborhood in Beirut from the headquarters, like very close to my house, the headquarters of the United Nations.
Well, they took a photo of him doing it, and they flattened 4 residential buildings. To put it in context, in 2002, when the Israelis leveled 1 building to kill a Hamas commander named Saleh Shahada and kill 7 kids in the process, even George W. Bush condemned them at the time. Such as the Overton window has moved to the right, that today Democrats, people like Justin Trudeau in Canada, Keir Starmer in London, have come out and said this was great, this was justice to kill Nasrallah in this way. Whatever you think about Hassan Nasrallah, to level apartment buildings and kill civilians, to go after terrorists, it's something we haven't seen even the US and the UK do in recent years. I would point out, by the way, Paul Hoffman, I would just acknowledge Paul Hoffman, our subscriber, who says he's a US citizen of Lebanese descent, and hearing these details make him sick. And Paul, I hope your family or anyone you have in Lebanon is safe. I do mention the failures of the UN Rula. An anonymous attendee to this chat, an anonymous subscriber, there's a mouthful of a word, has said a lot is being said about Israel and the West being duplicitous, but are not the Muslim nations equally to blame for their little talk and even less action? These nations are still supplying oil, diplomatic relations, and they are normalizing Israel. What do you make of the Arab countries' response to what's happened?
I would like to add, imagine if the global South and countries in the region would start using the same, not only tactics, mindset, because Israel has a minister who happened to be a convicted terrorist, Ben-Gvir. If somebody wants to take out Ben-Gvir from the region because of his incitement and his rhetoric and his vile, basically genocidal actions, and decide to take him out, he happened to be a convicted terrorist, and they would use the same exact, basically, tactics of Israel. Are they allowed or not? I mean, is only Israel is allowed to do certain, because once you open the Pandora box and you dismantle and decimate humanitarian law and legality, or even the Leahy law, and allow countries to walk all over you, then it's an open season and everybody will use your rationale to do whatever they want. Whatever they want. Regarding Arab leaders, look, they've been weak, they've been whatever, but just 2 days ago, while Bibi Netanyahu was advocating for greater Israel, holding, the map without any Palestine, and continue with this destructive genocidal mindset where he says, we will affirm our colonial project by force, by mass slaughter, and by mass starvation, and nobody will stand in our face. And it's just the Morning Lebanon strategy. Every 2 years or 3 years, we'll do whatever we want and we'll get away with it. At the same time, you have a bunch of foreign ministers, led by the Jordanian foreign minister, who on camera said, we are willing, 57 Muslim and Arab countries were willing to recognize Israel to guarantee its security. He even says, we're willing to guarantee the security of Israel. Unlike what he actually said, unlike what Netanyahu said, that they're surrounded by people who want their destruction, we're willing to guarantee your security on one condition: accept a Palestinian state, accept a diplomatic solution, and end your occupation of the West Bank, which is what United Nations...
Right? That's not what... And it's not what the Israelis want. They made that very clear. The Israeli Knesset voted against a two-state solution. I'm just going to bring... Guys, folks in the comments, we have a lot of questions. There's hundreds of you on this chat. We're trying to get through as many as we can. Rula's doing a great job. I'm going to answer a couple right now because they seem to be, to me, one is from Claudia Crawley, who says, what is driving Keir Starmer to give Israel ironclad support to Israel and ignore what's happening in Lebanon? I would say three things. Number one, he's advised by Tony Blair. Number two, there is a pro-Israel lobby in the UK, just as there is in the US. And number three, I think it's racist dehumanization. I think the reality is, for most politicians, whether left or right in the West, Arab lives, Muslim lives, brown lives don't have the same value. Marina Galanti says there is a U.S. candidate who's advocating for an immediate arms embargo to Israel, a foreign policy based on human rights. That's Jill Stein. Why do you constantly dismiss her? I don't think I've dismissed her, Marina. I did an interview with her in which I asked her to lay out how voting for the Green Party will stop the genocide. She's on 2% in the polls. She can't win the presidential election. Therefore, I don't see how voting for her stops the genocide unless it's part of some long-term strategy to put pressure on the Dems, create a third-party system, which is all valid, but it doesn't stop the killing right now. And one last one I'm going to take here. Somebody anonymously asked, what is the cost to Harris to go against Biden? Why isn't she doing it? Great question. I don't think the costs are that high, actually. Yes, some establishment folks will grumble. She might lose some donors, but the massive boost she will get in the polls in places like Michigan and Georgia will be huge, not just from Muslims and Arab Americans, but Black voters, Hispanic
progressives
voters, young voters, people of color, progressive, all of whom want to see a change on this issue. And I think she would get a huge boost. The American public's actually quite forgiving and actually quite amnesiac. They would put aside everything else she's done and they would give her credit for doing this. But let's see if she can do a Hubert Humphrey. Not much time left. Rula, you mentioned the Jordanian foreign minister and two-state solution. There was a question earlier. I'm just trying to find it, scrolling through the chat. Somebody asked a very interesting question about Hamas and Hezbollah. And they said, let me just find, I think I'm nearly there. Well, first of all, Pat Dressler asks, do you, Rula, believe a two-state solution is still viable? But as an extra question to that, Jeffrey Resnick asks, why don't Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran support a two-state solution? You can take both of those.
Well, listen, Hamas on multiple occasions actually said that they are willing to join in a unity government with the AP, the Palestinian Authority, the PA, and they're willing to accept what the Palestinians want. Look, I'm not a fan of Hamas, just to be clear. I've been obviously in opposition to their tactics, their ideology, etc. But in fairness, they moved along the way. However, I just want to remind, before asking why Hamas doesn't want two-state solution or one-state solution, I think they express their views clearly. I think the question should be asked and put to the Israelis: why did you accept to finance Hamas for so many years? Why did you send your envoy 3 weeks? The head of the Mossad, Yossi Cohen, to basically Qatar, to 3 weeks before October 7, to ask the Qataris again and again to finance Hamas, because they understood very clearly that the way to abort once and for all the two-state solution is to create a wedge between the PA and basically use Hamas as a scarecrow, basically to say to the international community, we cannot give them a Palestinian state because we have these terrorists that you've been enabling and financing. And I mean, the fact that
Netanyahu said this on the record in public.
Yes, absolutely. They said they're an asset. They call them an asset. Not only that, Netanyahu was the guy that released Sinwar from jail in 2011. Sinwar was somebody that never killed an Israeli. He actually killed only Palestinians who collaborated with Israel.
So you talked about Hamas. Hezbollah is in the news right now. Nasrallah is dead. A lot of people didn't see that coming. Israel.
I actually did.
You thought they would get Nasrallah because there was a whole argument about there's a much tougher organization than Hamas. They're much more embedded in the population in Lebanon. They're more popular in Lebanon than Hamas is in Gaza. Israeli intelligence has been very bad. But actually, the Israelis managed to kill Haniya in Tehran, and now they managed to kill Nasrallah in Beirut. Mahar Malik asks, What is Hezbollah doing to remove the IDF spies that must have infiltrated the organization? Why did so many in the Hezbollah leadership gather in one location at such a dangerous time? Rula, I read somewhere that Hezbollah's entry into the Syria war actually allowed Israel to infiltrate them because they ended up getting so many new volunteers, not in doing enough vetting. They actually are not the close-knit, very secure organization they once were.
Absolutely. Look, I've been to Syria multiple times, and the Syria war created deep resentment towards Hezbollah, the whole region. So it became very easy for Israel to recruit people who saw Hezbollah as a criminal organization, but also saw Hezbollah action against Palestinians in the Yarmouk camp, against Syrians, as very destructive. And this is the moment where Hezbollah fighters were training and been training to fight because they fought in Syria. Many of those but also the whole, guardrails collapsed somehow, and they thought that they were safe in Lebanon. They didn't realize that Israel was exploiting all of their weaknesses and understood how to drive a further wedge between them and the local population. Why were they infiltrated? Because basically they took their eyes out of the objective. The main objective after 82 was Israel occupation and invasion, etc. Now it became like another warlord who, prop up Assad and help Assad to stay in power.
They took their eyes off the time. It's a very good point. Let me ask you this. You mentioned popularity and driving a wedge. There's been a lot of commentary, especially online in recent days, from not just Israelis, but people in DC, think tanks, saying this is a great moment for Lebanon to free itself from Hezbollah. A lot of Christians and Sunnis in Lebanon hate Hezbollah. I mean, surely, and correct me if I'm wrong, surely bombing Lebanon in this way, displacing 1 million people, in most wars, the country get behind and get together against the external enemy. I would assume that a lot of Christians and Sunnis now, whether they were anti-Hezbollah before, are probably anti-Israel right now.
Absolutely. And Mehdi, look, many of those people who are saying it's time, it's what Jared Kushner said, it's deliverance and liberation, and it's an opportunity to reshape the middle, all of that, which is endorsed by also that other moron in Paris who is considered a philosopher, who goes with, no shirt. Exactly. Exactly, and now he's attacking even the United Nations General Secretary. All of these people are not only delusional, but these are the people that endorse the invasion of Libya, the war in Libya, and endorse as well the invasion and war in Iraq. And they even talked about liberation. Every empire used the same language when they want to invade and dominate and control and mass slaughter. They use the language to reshape the narrative, to say, oh, we're going to liberate and educate these uncivilized people. It doesn't matter that we break international law. It doesn't matter that we mass slaughter hundreds of thousands and whatever. The main question when you ask these people, and they wouldn't talk about Ukraine, and this is what's maddening. When they talk about Ukraine, it's like, oh my God, the invasion of Ukraine is it's just the worst crime that ever happened to us, and the mass slaughter, the mass starvation. How dare they do that? And then they turn around when it comes to the Palestinians and the Lebanese and the Jordanians and our blood, and they're like, yeah, never mind. Basically, they're using the same rhetoric like Ben Gvir. We are subhuman. We're animals. We are I think they're using the language of slavery that was used against African Americans. And you know how we discovered this? When you see Ta-Nehisi Coates scolded on national television, and he's called an extremist for simply empathizing and talking about the apartheid and the system that he knows very well, because he understands it.
The horrific CBS Morning News interview.
He called him extremist and terrorist.
He said Ta-Nehisi's book, the CBS News host said that Ta-Nehisi's book, which is about the apartheid in the West Bank, could be found in the backpack of an extremist, which tells you everything about the mindset. Rula,
but also he kept asking him, do you believe that should exist? I mean, it de facto exists. The other guy was not even omitting the fact that in his brain, Palestinians shouldn't exist.
Well, he alluded. 2 quick questions before we finish. Sorry, we haven't been able to take as many questions. We've got loads in the chat. I think we've got like 60 questions in the chat.
Oh my God.
We've answered over a dozen. Mohammed, Phil Grauer asks, I don't know if I've just butchered his last name. Phil, thank you, Zeteo subscriber. Will Israel try and kill Iran's supreme leader?
They can try to. I mean, what Israel doesn't understand, if you walk in Lebanon and if you walk in refugee camps, there's an amazing sentence written in the wall. bodies fall, but ideas endure. And all of these leaders are called living martyrs. Like Nasrallah knew that he was going to die somehow or another. There's number 2 and number 3. The whole organizations are built in a way that it doesn't matter who leads them. The whole idea around these organizations, and also, even the Iranians themselves, they're built in a way where what galvanizes them, what motivates them is, especially in the case of Hamas and Hezbollah and others, and in even the Hezbollah new leader, by the way, I believe he is relative with his son, or his daughter is married to Qasem Soleimani's own son and daughter. I mean, they're in charge of Hezbollah in Iran. I mean, like, this is the kind of connection. So you have to understand that you can't take them out. You can kill them tomorrow, but they will continue this axis of resistance.
It also leads to blowback, obviously. The last time they killed a Hezbollah leader in 1992, what followed was the attack on the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires. It killed a lot of people. It doesn't make them safe. Muhammad Ali Nahwi asks, if this tit-for-tat between Iran and Israel leads to a full-blown out war, what, if any, countries do you think will step in to help Iran? Is it Russia? Is it Syria? Do we see the countries lining up on different sides?
Yes. Look, Iran is part of the BRICS. Just people don't realize that the world is not only Europe and the United States. There are 7 billion people around the world. Do you think China will sit back and allow the US to continue doing what they're doing? They're already arming the Iranians. They're already arming the Russians. Those countries will rally. The global South is so resentful of the global North that try to dominate them militarily and politically, and talk down to them as if they are still savages on trees. They are now affirming in multiple ways that they are not willing to accept from the United States the rhetoric, but also the policies. So a lot of leaders will step up. Actually, we are not in full-blown war, thanks to Iran and to the fact that they are acting more rationally than the US and Israel combined.
It's astonishing.
It's astonishing.
Israel attacked the Iranian consulate in April, which we've just memory hold. Israel killed Hania on Tehran in Iranian soil, which we've memory hold. And now they killed a top general who was with Nasrallah. People are forgetting that an Iranian general was killed last week, which is what they were responding for. No one has to defend Iran, just to point out those facts. Last question that a lot of people have asked. A lot of people, I'm not even going to name them all, but so many people have asked this question, which is, Alice Sutter has asked, Ed David has asked, a bunch of people asking the same question. What do we do? How do we as Americans stop this war from escalating?
I think at this point, we need to pressure Kamala Harris to come out forcefully against the actions that are taking place in Lebanon. I believe she needs to understand, and I hope she's understanding that somebody in this administration is sabotaging her chances and basically paving the way for Trump to win the elections. And I believe that this is the last chance we have for her to come out forcefully and said, I will uphold America's Leahy law. I will enforce any country. She's obligated to do that. She should say, I am for conditioning military aid to Israel because I have to, because the Leahy law actually requires it. So as a prosecutor, as somebody who believes in law and order, she has to come out yesterday doing this. If she wants Michigan, if she wants progressive, if she wants people to come in drove, because, by the way, I predicted Trump victory in 2015. I am not sure now who's going to win. I think it's going to be very tight. You know what it hinges on? And Kamala Harris coming out now in favor of international law, in favor of humanitarian law, in favor of the Leahy law, and distancing herself from this genocidal war that Joe Biden seems to be, willing to somehow to jump in.
Well, I know a lot of members of Team Harris follow you, follow me, follow Zeteo. Let's hope they listen to you. Let's hope they change. Time is running out. And our time today has run out. Rula, thank you so much for making yourself available to give us your wisdom on this breaking news day week. Feels like every day is a breaking news day, but I landed from abroad yesterday to news of the Iranian missile strike, and I thought the best person to speak to would be you. I'm sure our Zeteo subscribers appreciate it too. If you're not, this was a town hall for paid subscribers. Those of you who are paid subscribers, we appreciate your support. Please get your friends and family to sign up as well. Support what we're doing here at Zeteo. Support independent journalism, especially in a time of war. Rula, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mehdi. I want to tell you, I just came back from Italy. I've been sued by the Italian Prime Minister, and that's why it's important for our subscribers to support us. I'm being sued by the Italian Prime Minister, by the Vice Prime Ministers, and by the President of the Parliament. So again, I think our work is important.
Badges of honor, Rula. You make the right
Absolutely.
enemy. The fascists and the genocidaires. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.